And thank you everyone for joining us this late morning. It's early morning for some of us. I'm Val Vera, Director of Disability Inclusion Society, and this is our third 8830 event. And we're having Sunday brunch with Alex Montoya. Before I talk about Alex, just a few reminders: keep your mics on mute or closed during the conversation, and we will talk for about 20 or so minutes, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. If you have any questions that you would prefer to type in the chat and have it read by our chat moderator, Martha, you can do that also. If you have any questions that have to do with either Disability Inclusion Society or disability in general, you're also welcome to do that in the chat as well. The mute, I said the mute, yes. So that's pretty much it. So we will get talking with Alex Montoya, who is an author, entrepreneur, speaker, big Padres fan, and a good friend of mine. So Alex, I appreciate you being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Great, great. Well, I want to start at the beginning because you have this interesting immigration story that I didn't know even when I knew you. So maybe you can share some of that with us.
Sure. Well, I was born in Medellin, Colombia, and I was born as a triple amputee due to a birth defect, missing both of my arms and my right leg. And so when I was 4 years old, the Shriners Hospitals here in the United States gave my family the option to have me move to the United States, where I had family already living, in order to be able to take advantage of their free services, receive prosthetics, receive education. And so we jumped at it, and I entered the country legally when I was 4. But that basically led me to living in the U.S. All the way into a time period when I was when I then became illegal per se, or undocumented. So it was very interesting to kind of have all that happening at the very beginning of my life.
And since today is the actual anniversary of the 30th anniversary of the ADA, going back then to your younger years when you were in school, what was that experience like as not only an immigrant but as a disabled person?
Sure. It was an absolute eye-opener, Val, because when I first started school, it was the very end of the 1970s. It was essentially 79, 80. San Diego schools in San Diego, California, were not fully integrated, meaning if you were someone that had a disability, you were placed on an exclusively disability-oriented campus or a disability-oriented school. If you did not have a disability, you went to a whole different type of campus. And so it was really surprising to my family that here I was in the U.S. Specifically for the reason of having more opportunity and having the ability to make the most out of opportunity. And then we saw that I was essentially going to be shuttered away on a completely different campus. And it was especially surprising that happened in California, the most progressive state. We were very surprised to learn that. So it was difficult. So I was actually one of the very first students mainstreamed from a disability campus to a non-disabled campus, and it was absolutely a time of transition. You had, a lot of teachers that were not prepared to deal with students with disabilities. You had kids who had not really had that exposure within their homes or their neighborhoods, and so it was a steep learning curve. You certainly had campuses that weren't prepared physically for the needs of students with disabilities. So the whole beginning of the 1980s was really a time of adjusting and educating others.
Well, that's great. Now, you did go on to graduate high school, got accepted by Notre Dame. But during that time, you also were almost sent back to Colombia.
Right. So the way that it occurred was in 1990, when I was a sophomore in high school, was when the ADA was passed, and I didn't realize at the time how historic that would be in my life, because it really kind of paved the way for the rest of my life. I mean, being the most important civil rights law ever for people with disabilities. By the time that I graduated. The ADA was then law, and no longer, of course, was discrimination allowed. So I kind of had two things going on at the same time. My visa had expired, so all of a sudden I was an undocumented student. I had to go to an immigration judge to show that I made the most of my time here, that I was a good student, that I was going to contribute to society, in a positive way, and that I had gotten accepted to several universities, one of them being the University of Notre Dame, and that was where I really wanted to go to school. So went there, and same thing. I arrived to the campus in the summer of 1992, and even though the bill had been passed into law for a good 2 years now, the campus was not ready at all. Completely inaccessible, completely just not ready for any sort of changes. The university itself had been around over 150 years, and there had been literally a handful of students with disabilities among their student population. They kind of just took things on a case by case basis. And when I arrived, I think they knew that here they had somebody with a very visible physical disability they were going to have to make some allowances on their campus for. But then also, now the ADA was law, and it was federal law. And so they saw that they were going to have to make changes. Now I had the weight of being a permanent legal residency behind me, so I wasn't going anywhere. And one thing that I convinced them, the administration and the faculty and the people in the school, was that I would be gone within 4 years. But now, with the ADA being in effect, there was going to be a flood of students applying and
Right.
wanting to go to that school. So they had to really think of long-term solutions for long after I left. And they listened, and they made short-term accommodations. And probably the thing that I was the proudest of was they eventually went from being a what they called the Disability Services Committee. It was literally a committee of administrators to building a disability services center, fully staffed and fully capable of handling every disability type, not only for students but faculty, workers on the campus, community members. They finally stepped into the reality that the ADA had kind of ushered forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I mean, going to school during that time, I mean, we're a little bit of the same age and some of the
Yeah,
same experiences of being the first to, or the trailblazer in making
yeah,
something accessible, bringing awareness. Yeah.
right.
You were involved in a lot of extracurricular stuff during that time. What's some of the things that stick out in your mind?
Yeah, it was really interesting because, like you mentioned, you and I were almost trailblazers by default. We were the first in our classrooms to have prosthetics and wheelchairs and show people a whole different reality. And in my experience, the fellow students were normally very open to it, very helpful, and be as inclusive as possible. So that part was great. But whenever you get into the area of trying to convince uh, any administration or any campus, to make physical changes to the campus, that costs money. And that's where you begin to see a little bit of resistance. So it was really interesting to kind of see, where the resistance was, just like the resistance in bringing those of us from disabled campuses to non-disabled campuses some 10, 12 years earlier. But eventually they saw this is the wave of the future. This is going to be part of our demographics, and if we're true about making a more diverse student body, we're going to have to
Yeah.
prepare for it. So I made sure that anything that I was involved in, whether it be student government or student journalism, I made sure that I made my needs known and that I was an advocate for myself because I knew no one else was going to really be an advocate. And I also made sure to understand that they were really going on completely new ground. They hadn't had other students that had my kinds of needs, and so I needed to really be very specific about what I needed. And again, even if it was a matter of being a pest, I knew that I was doing it not just for myself, but for the students that were going to come after me.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's fast forward a little bit because after that, you and I both worked at the Center for Independent Living. You landed a dream job with the Major League Baseball team, the San Diego Padres, um, for quite a while. Then after that, you kind of did your own thing. What led you to just become an author and basically an entrepreneur?
Sure. Well, it's certainly been an interesting path. You and I crossed paths in the late '90s, the glorious decade of the '90s, at the Access Center, Independent Living Center of San Diego.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and one of the more interesting things that the Access Center was doing advocacy wise was they were helping the San Diego Padres baseball club with planning for their new ballpark, Petco Park, and really taking care of the accessibility aspect of it. So through that work, I got to know several members of the Padres front office staff and developed relationships with them. Sports, of course, has always been my number one passion, as I know it is for you. And I had always wanted to have a career related somehow to sports management. So what I did was just kind of work my way up the ladder. While I was at the Access Center, I had a part-time job on the Padres event staff as an usher. After I left the Access Center for another full-time job with the local Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, did that for a number of years, and the Padres eventually saw that I was persistent. I wasn't going away. I knew their system pretty well, and that I wanted to fully be a part of their organization. So in 2006, I joined their front office staff and began a 10-year run where I was the manager of Latino Affairs, handling any sort of community outreach or marketing related to Latino community. Of course, here in San Diego, that means really being a cross-border effort. It's both San Diego and Mexico. So got to do that. A lot of hard work, but a lot of fun. And after about 10 years, I had I had really kind of picked up a passion project of mine. My other main passion besides sports has always been writing, just writing and communicating. And in 2008, I had published my first book, Swinging for the Fences, where I detailed my experiences as an immigrant, my experiences as an immigrant with a disability. By then, I had become a full-fledged citizen, so full-fledged citizen of the U.S., and just all the experiences and what all of that was like. Really thinking that it was just an opportunity for me to share my story and do what I love the most, which is writing. But to my surprise, people were keenly interested in the story and in learning more, and received quite a few invitations to speak and to deliver presentations. And so, about 10 years into my Padres career, I was getting a little burnt out, to be frank with you. And we had also had a change in ownership and management. So they were making some staffing changes. So I figured it was a good time for me to venture out on my own and start my own motivational communications company. So that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, where I write books, I ghostwrite or edit books for other people, and I deliver motivational talks across the country. So motivational communications is really the product, and it's been a really great, blessed 5 years.
That's awesome. What you've written 5 books, 6 books?
So I have written 6 books of my own, and I have ghostwritten 2 books for others. And I have a couple other books for other clients in production, but 6 of my own and 2 for others.
I noticed that you just published a children's book. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's my very first endeavor, man. So one of my main audiences, and I think, quite frankly, one of the main audiences for any person with a disability is always kids, because kids are always the most curious. They're the
Mm,
ones that ask you the questions the most straight up and the most straightforward. They want to know why you look different than they do, and why you look different
yeah,
than anyone they know, and how things work, how wheelchairs, how prosthetics work,
yeah,
how assistive technology works. They want to know, and I know you and I both share the view that it's better to let them ask questions and answer them straight up instead
yes,
of instead of them being shielded or told to look away or told to look in another direction, because then they think that what we have is bad or forbidden or just something not normal, right? So disability awareness has always been really a main staple of both my personal life and my professional life. And so I decided, well, given that I'm a writer, I want to take a stab at writing my first children's book. So I decided this just a few short months ago. Um, and so I took a story that I tell during my talks of a little adventure that I had when I was about 6 years old, where I decided to climb the monkey bars for the very first time in my life on the playground with the help of my new non-disabled friends and classmates, and how I got stuck on the monkey bars. And that story just tells so much about inclusion, determination, but also just not giving up and believing that you are equal to everyone else. Um, did my research in terms of the best ways to communicate that story to kids, which is through rhyming, through good illustrations. Uh, Turned it into a children's book. Used the Amazon print on demand technology, and used this time of COVID, where we were all quarantined and we're all at home and we all have nothing but time, and completed that. And so it's on Amazon now. It's called Alex Masters the Monkey Bars, and it's all about inclusion, but also the main goal being to encourage kids to befriend people with disabilities and to assist them in any way possible, because they're going to realize that they're going to be making a great friend in the process.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I want to ask you to read a portion of one of your books, but the one thing that a lot of people don't know is that you're an actor. You had an acting spot in television or
Yeah.
on the big screen, actually.
Yes.
Tell
So,
us about that.
gosh, it's been a while, but well, so my major at Notre Dame was communications, and my minor was theater. So I was a communications theater grad, and the um, the great part about that was I decided to kind of just take those lessons and take my hand at acting. Now, what's interesting is being someone with a disability and just having extra challenges. I wasn't quite prepared to just move to LA and dedicate everything to it full time. I mean, I have more considerations than your average non-disabled person, and so I knew that wasn't going to quite be a reality. But a friend that I had started a group where he would train specifically people who are amputees into how to be stunt people, stunt men and stunt women for
Okay.
movies. And so he actually was able to kind of carve his own niche into something that wasn't stunt related, but essentially director by the name of Steven Spielberg. I'm sure you've heard of him. He created a movie called Artificial Intelligence (AI), in 2000, and he specifically was looking for people that were prosthetic users because he wanted to take those prosthetics and add some elements to them to make them look robotic. So, I have my two prosthetic arms. I have my hooks here, my prosthetic arms. So what they did was they took these arms, they just added, really a few different kind of layers to them and made them look robotic. So myself and a few other actors got selected to play a group of robots in this film, Artificial Intelligence. And it was my first time being on a set, being around that world. Um, it was a lot of fun. It was really enjoyable. I got to work on another film a year later, Minority Report, and both of them were experiences of a lifetime. It kind of satisfied for me the need to do that, and I kind of felt like, okay, I've experienced it. I've seen what it's like. I'm going to choose some other career pathways, but I was glad that I was able to try. And for me too, I think one of the satisfying things was something that the world may tell you is a weakness, or may tell you, is something that's going to prevent you from being in pictures, was actually what allowed me to be in pictures. So really, in that way, it was a blessing. It was empowering, and I'm glad I got to do it. And even when I do motivational talks or when I do presentations, taking those skills that I learned from that brief stint is very applicable. So everything ties together. You can take things that you learn in one area and apply them to another. But it was a lot of fun.
Definitely, definitely. Can you read a passage from one of your books?
Okay, so let me just get everything set up here.
And then we'll go into our Q&As.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do is so during this time of quarantine, I actually did a dual book release. I did my I did my children's book, and then I did another book that's more of an adult motivational type book called "You Got This," and it really ventures, Val, into my acknowledgement that not only do I have my physical disability, but I also had to be very honest about a year ago and admit to the world that in addition to dealing with these challenges, I was also dealing with depression and anxiety. And it's something, of course, that's very pervasive in the disability community, and something that I think needs to be talked about more, and mental wellness needs to be talked about more. And so I decided to share my story and talk about how both my disability, but also losing my mom a year ago, her passing, really was very hard for me. And I wrote this book as kind of a way to show people my journey of kind of how I spiraled downwards, to be frank with you, but also how I got back up. And so the passage that I'm about to read in You Got This, we actually were in Miami, where my mom was living at the time. We had just laid her to rest, and I was out there with my siblings for a week in Miami, and I'll go in right here. So we were in Miami, and my brother was my roommate, and I realized after a couple days that not only was I feeling physical pain, but I was feeling, I'm sorry, not only was I feeling emotional pain, but I was feeling physical pain. My brother, as my roommate, would help me put on my prosthetic leg each and every day. And unfortunately, he didn't realize that when he tucked my leg sock into the socket, it would pinch my skin, causing excruciating pain. After about a week, I realized that this pain was too much to bear. It was okay when I was walking, or okay when I was seated in a chair in my aunt's kitchen, but whenever we were in a car, or whenever we were on a sofa, or wherever we were doing anything mobile, the pain was too excruciating. Finally, I had to tell him, look, man, I appreciate everything you've done for me as my brother and as my roommate, but I got to be honest with you. We've been doing something wrong with my leg, and it's really, really hurtful. Not only that, I really appreciate the fact that you lift me up in the morning and put me into the shower. But to be honest with you, you're kind of cracking my ribs every time you do. My brother looked at me and said, bro, why didn't you tell me any of this before? And I said, well, I felt bad because you've been helping me and you are doing the work that normally a caregiver will do for pay. You've been doing for free this week, and I just didn't want to seem ungrateful. To me, that illustrated what people with disabilities often go through. We oftentimes will put our pain aside because we don't want to be a bother. We don't want to be a nuisance. We don't want to be someone that the world looks upon and figures we have to take care of this person even more so. My brother assured me that it was no problem to put my leg on the right way, and it was no problem to be a little more gentle when lifting me in and out of the shower, and that I had to learn to speak up. It was a lesson that I feel all people with disabilities need to learn. We need to speak up. We need to advocate for ourselves. We need to not worry about appearing too troublesome to everyone else. We need to speak up for the best of our intentions and to make ourselves the best we can be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And on that note, I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. So, how this go? You can unmic yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question, or if you feel more comfortable typing it in the chat, and Martha will read it out loud, we can do that as well. So, anyone have a question? Anyone?
You can ask me anything.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm not sure if I missed it, but what is the name of the children's book that you wrote?
The name of the children's book is Alex Masters the Monkey Bars.
Awesome. I plan to buy it. I teach, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a little plug here. If you go on Amazon and just punch in Alex Montoya books, you'll see all my books listed there. But you should see the children's book, Alex Masters the Monkey Bars, at the very top.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Heather.
Oops, sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I'm a doctoral student, and I'm doing research in adapted physical activity and fitness. And I am interested in disability representation in these areas. And I am a person with a disability. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, but my research does not necessarily work with that population. So my question to you is, how, as someone that is trying to work in disability representation that doesn't necessarily have a physical disability, or basically, how should I be doing research? Should I be doing research in this area? And if I'm going to be doing it, how can I best represent everyone and make my work impactful? Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing is for everyone to see that every disability matters and every disability counts, and that we should not discount a disability just because it's not visible. So you're really talking about, kind of getting into the area of, sometimes people don't believe that someone has a disability or has disability needs just because they don't see it necessarily, or because it's as visible as other disabilities might be. So for sure, continue to advocate, continue to make sure that awareness is raised so that people know what exactly is going on. In terms of research, by all means, do as much research and exploration as you can, because guaranteed somebody needs it, somebody is counting on it, somebody is relying on it. You're going to make the pathway better for the future. Like Val and I said, when we were kind of doing our work within our high school and college campuses, we were thinking about, even at that young age, how the work we were doing wasn't just for us, but for the students that were going to follow us. And so I think you should always have in your mind not only is how your work impacting your life and your path journey, but how it's going to impact everyone that comes after you, because that's really the lasting impact. And I think too, there's always a almost an overlap when it comes to disability needs. As I mentioned before, I never really had thought about the connection between physical disability and physical wellness related to mental wellness until I realized that so many of the things that I was experiencing within my disability walk and my disability journey was actually leading to mental illness and to struggling with depression and anxiety. I didn't put all those things together until finally, when I realized what was going on. I realized how so many aspects of my life from years and years earlier kind of really had led to that moment. And so with you, it's very apparent to me that the work that you're doing and the challenges that you face really have overlap in several areas. So always look for that connection. Always look for how one can connect to the other, and how one piece of research or one piece of discovery that you can make will benefit not only one area, but really many areas. But I really applaud you.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you basically just answered everything that I wanted to ask about wellness, as well as connected to your physical well-being as well. And so when you said that you realized the pain that you experienced emotionally, that it was also connected to the physical being. Oh, you said you experienced this about a year ago, right? Since you've done that, what have you done to bring the two together? What have you done to just basically know that this is mental illness, that this is associated with my physical pain as well? I mean, do you do therapy?
Sure. And thank you for being here today. The two biggest things that I did was, number one, I really made public to the world the struggle that I was going through. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something that I did quickly. I had to put a lot of thought and prayer into it. And whether I told people one-on-one who were kind of the people closest to me, or, as we do, these days, made a public announcement via social media, that's where you reach the most people. I was just very frank about what I was going through. And the thing that surprised me the most, that really was also helpful, the most, was the amount of people that came forward to say, I'm with you, I support you. But not only that, I've gone through that myself. These were people that I always considered to be very well adjusted, very confident, people that I thought, man, they've got it all. And for them to step forward and say, I've had mental illness, or someone in my family has had mental illness, it's something that I'm dealing with friends or family, uh, you're going to get through this. You got this. That was the biggest surprise to me. In addition to that, I started therapy. And I think, the world's biggest advocate for therapy, because I can't say enough about it. So I began psychological therapy and meeting with a therapist initially once a week. Now that I've been about 8 months into it, we've reduced it a little bit. I think I tend to go more towards once a month, but it's still very, very helpful, and something that I'm going to continue to do. I don't think that you ever reach a point where you say, okay, I'm done, I'm healed, I'm cured. It's perpetual, and therapy is something that I plan on doing forever. It's something that I think everyone needs. It's something that I think would be helpful for everyone. So the two biggest things that I did was to really come out to the world and tell them I'm dealing with this, and I want to come clean, and I need your support. And then began therapy, and both of those have been extremely helpful, extremely life giving. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I wanted to ask you, I mean, oftentimes we talk about when it comes to the intersections of culture and disability, how do you balance that? That's one of those things where, identifying as disabled and having disability cultural pride, and then as a Latino American, how do you balance that? How does one impact the other? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. It's a great question because uh, there are so many intersections there, and each one of them can be its own topic. Uh, you know, Latinos as a community oftentimes tend to be very coddling and very protective, and so we need to break past the temptation to just quote unquote be taken care of our whole life. Um, Latino culture also oftentimes still today very much is very macho oriented, especially for men, and really kind of balancing the realness of saying I have a disability, I need support, I need help, but for you and me to also say we're still men and we still have a lot of pride in being men and being leaders. In your case, being a father, being a provider, and showing people the two aren't mutually exclusive. That you can be someone who needs help and needs assistance, um, but is still strong. That doesn't show weakness. That actually shows strength, and just showing pride in who you are. The other aspect in terms of Latino community is there's still oftentimes the belief that well, if you have a disability, it's punishment from God. You should be kind of shuttered away. You shouldn't be out in the world. You shouldn't be showcased out there the way anybody else is, and really fighting past that and showing that we have a voice, and showing that we have viewpoints and opinions, and things that deserve to be seen as much as anything else, or as much as anybody else. The overall concept of disability culture is really so interesting because I know, for example, you are a wonderful writer and a wonderful lyricist, and the experiences that you put out there is a perspective completely unique to yourself, that most people don't have. And I know for me, oftentimes I've had to kind of fight past the reticence of really kind of, showing my overall experiences, because I don't want it to seem like I'm showing weakness per se, but then recognizing that it is a unique perspective, and that people need to see the things that I go through, the things that I see, the things that I experience, and that there is strength in that. So it's always quite a balancing act to be able to show both. But I think people see that nobody is one thing. Nobody is just one. I guess chromatic type person. Everyone has a lot of layers to them, and especially in your case, in my case, being Latino males with disabilities, and even that is just a piece of who we are. There's just so many more layers overall, but not being afraid to show those layers.
Exactly. Good points. Do you have any other questions at all? Don't be shy. No. I remember you told me one time, you could share the story of how you became an Olympic torchbearer.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. So my senior year of college at Notre Dame, I had the great honor of being asked to be a torchbearer for the Summer Olympics. In 1996, the Olympic Games were held in Atlanta, and uh, the torch process is actually really interesting. It's actually 10,000 torches, but one flame. It's literally one flame that gets lit in Athens, Greece, gets shipped to wherever the host country is for the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics. Never goes out. Is contained in a like a flaming cauldron the entire time, and that flame lights one torch at the beginning of each day, and then the torch relay is what they call it. The torch relay actually goes from one end of the country to the other. And like I said, there's about 10,000 torches. They're each about maybe 3 feet high, maybe a little less. And so that year, they wanted what they called torchbearers to represent the American spirit, one of them being overcoming adversity. And so I was very fortunate and very humbled to be selected. And so there's a little town in Indiana called Rensselaer, Indiana. They told me the entire town is going to come see you carry the torch. And I thought that was a lot of hyperbole, but literally the entire town came out and watched me get my torch lit. I walked maybe about a mile, and then I lit the next person's torch, and then they continued on their journey. And the flame itself began in Southern California, made its way all the way eventually to the opening ceremonies in Atlanta, where none other than Muhammad Ali was the person that lit the torch for the flame that stayed lit during the entire Summer Olympiad. And it's still, years later, is crazy to me to think that I even have any sort of connection to Muhammad Ali whatsoever. But it also kind of showed me, Val, in a greater sense, how, all of us are torch relayists. We're all torch bearers. How we've taken the lessons and the sacrifices made by those in the disability rights movement. We've taken everything that everyone has done there, and all the sacrifices made before us, and we've made our own sacrifices. We've made our own advocacy, and we do it so that we can carry the torch for the future generations and for the future kids and the future students, and trusting that they're going to take that torch and pass it along as well. So we're just one moment in time, but we take that torch when we have our hands on it, and we carry it, and then we pass it along to somebody else, and that's how change is made.
That is exactly how change is made. Good points. Any questions from the audience at all? No questions at all?
I have one.
Oh, okay. And Martha had one too, but go ahead.
Okay, so in your book, what is it, the wolf pack?
So what?
In the book that you have called the wolf pack.
Yes. So out of my 6 books, one is called The Wolf Pack.
Yes.
That was published in 2017. That is actually the only book that I've written that is fiction.
I was going to ask you, what's it based on?
Everything else
all in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what I did was, it's okay for someone that is a disability advocate to sometimes step away from being a disability. And, you don't have to necessarily do it 24/7, or you don't have to have every single thing that you say be related to advocacy. That's just like, for example, someone who's a comedian. You don't expect for every single word to be funny, right? Unless you're pretty funny. But yeah, I wanted to kind of step away from the advocacy space or the motivation space for a minute and just write something that was fictional. In a way, it kind of was disability related in that I'm very open about how I think one of the main ways that a person with a disability survives, and really how anyone survives, is through their friends and having strong friendships. And I had a group of friends in downtown San Diego that were all kind of experiencing interesting aspects of our lives, and we had all experienced some form of loss within a certain time frame. And so I sought out their permission, and I said, "Do you mind if I create a fictional book about our experiences and what we're going through? But I obviously will change your name, I'll change your identity, make it so that no one can tell that it's you. But I really want to talk about kind of what we've all learned individually through our loss, but how we're all here for each other and helping each other." And they each granted permission. And so if you recall the movie the Hangover series, they introduced the concept of your friends being your wolf pack. And so I created this book because my closest friends, we call each other the wolf pack. We are the wolf pack to one another. And the adventures you see in that book is a compilation of things that we've experienced together, some other things that I just kind of brought in as a writer. But it felt nice to just write fiction and be creative and write something that was kind of away from my personal experiences per se.
That's excellent. Martha, you had a question?
Yeah. First, I just wanted to comment on your advocacy for therapy. I just think that that's wonderful that you're able to speak against the stigma of mental illness, and it takes strength to take care of your mental wellness. So I'm a therapist, so that like made my heart so happy.
Thank you.
My question for you is about your metaphor of being a torchbearer, which I love that metaphor. I'm relatively new to this movement. You have seen so much change in your life, and you've been a part of bearing this torch and coming down that road for a long time now. Where do you feel like today's torchbearers need to be heading? Like in
That's a great question. I mean, above all, today's torchbearers need to just keep carrying that torch. But I think I think several things. I think first of all, we are learning and experiencing more and more by the day and by the month and by the year. And I think it seems to me like as the years go on, we discover disabilities or disability advocacies that we didn't even consider a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think we should always be open to exploring, what sort of disability types are out there, what sort of overlap is out there. I'll use this comparison. When it comes to advocacy for the LGBTQ community, we really have only been using the phrase LGBTQ, I would say, to my knowledge, probably in the last couple of years. That's something that progressed over time. And it was just a matter of increased awareness that not only was there the gay community, the lesbian community, the queer community, but also the transgender community. And that specific community, that specific population has allowed themselves to evolve over time to say, hey, we should be counted too, whoever we are. Same with disability community. We need to constantly explore what disabilities are out there, especially now with COVID and with the quarantine, maybe some new disability types emerge. Maybe there are some more mental health challenges that unfortunately arise from all of this. Maybe people who are immunity compromised. Maybe this is an important time for their advocacy to step forward as well. I think we should always have our eyes open to that. I think the other thing too is we live in a world that is constantly changing by the minute, technology-wise. And when it comes to being a torchbearer, it's not enough to just say, I'm going to advocate, I'm going to push, I'm going to make my voice heard. I think it's just as important to know what are the platforms that we're going to do this by. So I'll tell you what, a year ago, I had never heard of TikTok. A year ago, I had not been making Zoom calls. Things change really quickly. And whether it's social media platforms or communication platforms like Zoom, like Skype, we need to constantly be on top of what's out there. We need to be constantly be on top of how we can make those platforms even more accessible for people. And we need to make sure that we're making our message known on all the platforms as best as possible. So stay up on technology. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I've got a long way to go, but I would say, especially for the young torchbearers, utilize technology as your friend and as your ally, and begin to recognize how people are receiving their news, how people are receiving their information, and how we can be on top of those things to get our message out.
And I'll add to that, one of the greatest things I think about the disability community is that we adapt. Like, we're creative because we have to be. Because
Yes.
we have to figure out how to do things, because we have to figure out how to navigate a society that really wasn't built for us. So, during this time of COVID and quarantine and stay in place, I mean, using Zoom has allowed a lot of people to connect with others that they never would have had this
Yes.
not happened. So I think
Yes.
sometimes we have to kind of think outside the box even further.
Yeah, Val, I have stated that I believe people with disabilities in many ways are even better suited to face the times that we're facing, and specifically to face the quarantine specifically, because our whole lives are based on adapting. Our whole lives are based on adjusting. Our whole lives are based on taking the whatever reality exists and figuring out a way to make it work and being as flexible as possible. And then when more challenges get thrown your way, just continuing to adapt. It's really interesting within my own personal journey. So I'm someone that wears 3 prosthetics. I have 2 prosthetic arms and a prosthetic leg. And just 2 weeks ago, I incurred a foot injury that prevented me from wearing my prosthetic leg for about 2 weeks now. So for the last 2 weeks, I have been a wheelchair user. And, I have gotten just a small slice of what people who are wheelchair users face each day. But I quickly had to learn, what did I need to adapt to? What do I need assistance with? What can I do on my own? Even big picture things like, things that even I within my normal journey don't think about enough. Are there curb cuts on the sidewalks? How is the accessibility in a building? Can I fit my wheelchair into my apartment? Those are things that you don't, people normally don't think about unless it either happens to them or to a loved one. And kind of extending it to the COVID example, we're built for this. We're kind of built for toughness and made for greatness, because we are used to the everyday struggle of adjusting, adapting, making the most, and then just figuring out a way to make it work.
Definitely, definitely. We have time for maybe one more question if anyone has one. How's the time?
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for being here with us today. I you mentioned student government. How was your experience as an SG leader, and what prompted you to get involved in that space?
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to get a little philosophical with you for a minute. Last summer I returned to the country that I was born in, Medellin, Colombia, and discovered that a great grandfather of mine was actually a political leader in the country of Colombia. Something that I never knew in my entire 46 years on this earth. I never knew that this man had existed. So when I discovered that you know, this great grandfather was involved in politics in Colombia, everything made sense. All of my political leanings and political involvement as a student, my entire life, and even my advocacy just as a citizen and as a voter made perfect sense as to kind of you know, inheriting those traits. So all my life I've been involved in student government, student politics, student leadership positions. My life philosophy is to focus on what you have and not on what you're missing, and recognizing that I may be missing some things physically. One thing that I know that I have is a good brain and an ability to comprehend and to analyze and to speak. And so I've always, you know, kind of put those efforts towards student government, you know, when I was a student. I have always found that that segment of the population was the most helpful when it came to any of our needs, any of our advocacies, any of our demands. These were generally students that tended to be very progressive, very big picture oriented, very future minded. And so, you know, when we would talk to them about making renovations, making changes to the campus, making physical changes, including accommodations within the classroom. And remember, at the time that I entered college, Notre Dame only had an accessibility committee. They didn't have anything that really had teeth. So it really was incumbent on the students to make their own organic change. And the students that I encountered, even to be quite frank, the most conservative ones, and even the ones that were the most conservative budgetarily, were always the most understanding and the biggest allies. And so I strongly advocate for any students that are disabilities to be involved in advocacy, to be involved in student government, and even if you're not a student, to be involved in government and advocacy just as a citizen. Because if we don't stand up for our rights, who will?
Exactly. Exactly. You know, Alex, I knew this would be fun to do this with you, but it's really like a pleasure for me to share your experiences with the people here, because I know a lot of these stories, and I shared some of them with you well over 20 years ago. So I appreciate you. I love you, brother, and thank you for taking this time for sharing your vulnerabilities too with all of us here. So that's definitely appreciated.
Thank you, man. I love you. I love everything you're doing. Keep going. Keep being the great leader that you are. And just appreciate everybody joining us today.
Thank you, thank you. And I do thank you everyone for being here for our third ADA 30 event. We have one more tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central. And we're talking about disability in Denton. So we have a 9-person panel of business leaders, community leaders, disability leaders, and city council leaders. And we're going to talk about disability. So don't forget that today is the ADA 30 happy birthday. So celebrate it in a way that's befitting of the moment and of what the ADA has achieved and what it hasn't achieved. and we'll take it from there. Thank you everyone again for being here, and we'll see you soon.